lot of work on power analysis in our local politics and identifying where the political power lies and how do we affect it. And so that's something that anybody who's interested could get involved in, could contact us by email or phone. And all of that is available on our website at cincinnatihomeless.org. And to kind of just continue on and add some more perspective. So in 2023, in the whole year, of all the families with children that called seeking shelter, called the 381 Safe line asking for shelter, approximately 83% of those families were turned away. 83% were turned away because there was no space in the shelters for them. And it's important to note that if you look at it on a daily basis, the percentage of people or families turned away is even higher, probably closer to 90% turned away. So that 83% includes moms, for example, that called every day over a month or 2 months and eventually got in. So even with that, still 83%. And the problem should be obvious. We don't have enough affordable housing. And so much so that more and more households are losing the homes that they have. And it should be no surprise because nearly 46,000 Cincinnati households, both renters and owners, cannot afford their home today. Nearly 46,000. And more than, that means can't afford means that those households are paying greater than 30% of their income for their housing costs. More than half of those households are paying greater than 50% of their income for housing. And so when we have so little affordable housing that a third of our city, probably more than 100,000 people, are that vulnerable, it means that we inevitably will have homelessness. We will have more people showing up for family shelter than is available, more people showing up at the women's shelter than space will allow. And so it's imperative that we, of course, can continue to work to fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And we will be deciding collectively what is the next big move that we make to accomplish that. But the foundation of any effort, past or in the future, really will be on community organizing and on building our strength in our neighborhoods across the city. So just last week, I guess now 2 weeks ago, we held a teach-in at Mount Auburn Presbyterian Church. It was very well attended. The theme of the teach-in, the flyers that went up advertising it, the theme was, are you having problems with your landlord? And a lot of people are. And so we had very good attendance. And the whole push of it, some of it is about, well, what are your rights as a tenant? But that in and of itself doesn't take up a great deal of time because there's not many rights, not many legally protected rights. But we all have basic human rights. And so much of it is about the power of organizing with your neighbors to fight for better conditions, to fight to keep the building. There's a lot of the limited affordable housing we have in our city and our county that is really in poor shape and in some cases deplorable conditions. And so what we'd like to do, we had this large group come out I think 80 or so people came to that teach-in from all over the city. And then the next step is we hope to take that teach-in or a version of it to specific neighborhoods. So say we go to one of the Price Hills, or we go to Avondale, or one of the Fairmounts, etc. And folks that came to the first teach-in now know the power of it and can then in their neighborhoods invite all of their friends and family and neighbors to come. And so that's a way of empowering people to form their own tenant organizations in various neighborhoods across the city. It's also a way to gather more people to be involved in the larger effort to push for funding of affordable housing, because one of the effects of having an adequately funded affordable housing trust fund that is targeted where the need is that your landlords out here whose properties are in bad condition because they are not investing the rent monies back in. Some landlords are trying to do a good job and are struggling to keep up, but there are also lots of landlords who are not, just are not doing a good job. And so having more housing that is of quality and affordable pushes those landlords, those bad landlords, to do better, because now people have other options, right? Right now, if your place is in shambles, the landlord has quite a bit of leverage over you because you don't have many other options. They don't have other places to go. And for the good landlords out there that are struggling and want to keep providing quality, or want to provide quality housing, we would then have a local source of funds to secure that housing. And keep in mind, in our neighborhoods where gentrifying forces have come in and are buying up properties or attempting to buy up properties, a lot of times those forces, they put pressure on the historic mom and pop landlords who are good people and are serving their neighbors, but are struggling to keep to make ends meet. And so a developer could come along and say, I'll purchase your property and give you a profit on it. But if we have a trust fund that can come in and say, look, we can provide you with some funds to fix your building, and you can keep doing what you've done. You can keep serving your neighbors. Then people are more likely to continue to do that work. And that helps keep our neighborhoods intact. So we don't have people just constantly being pushed from neighborhood to neighborhood. And so again, if anybody is interested in being a part of the Cincinnati Action for Housing Now work to determine what the next steps are, both determine what the next steps are and continuing in just the organizing work. If somebody is in your neighborhood, you think it would be great to have the host of our teach-in about the power of tenant organizing, please reach out so that we can do that together. Something else that we are doing actively is we're in the process of establishing what generically is called a homeless Congress. And so it's not a new idea, but the idea is that people who are experiencing homelessness now or have in the past gather together in an official capacity and can put forth policy or can chime in on, take stances on policy or actions in the extent of which we don't know, because folks themselves would determine what that looks like. But thus far, we have had multiple meetings with groups of people who are living outdoors, people in the men's shelter, family shelter, women's shelter, and now there's lots of interest amongst folks to be a part of this. And so the effort now is to figure out how all of these groups in different locations throughout the city can operate as one, can be together, even just physically, time of the day and all. And but it's exciting because people are seem to be really enthusiastic, and the idea is that if city council, for example, is considering whatever policy, a zoning policy, a funding policy, the budget, whatever it may be, that perhaps that policy addresses homelessness or doesn't address homelessness, this Congress could weigh in and speak from a perspective of personal experience. And that can be very powerful for the people that are involved, and it can be effective when you have a real commentary about the real experience. And imagine the potential if the group goes this way, the potential of annually having elections at each of the shelters, having elections at soup kitchens, and have people run and folks to discuss who can best represent our interests. All of that is powerful to think about. It takes a lot to get it off the ground, but people are very interested. So in terms of that, if folks or you yourself would like to be a part of that effort and you have personal experience, please reach out to us. Again, it's very much in the early stages of building and figuring it all out. And I want to also address, I can't remember if the last time I was here, this was Connected Communities was a part of the conversation yet or not. But earlier this year, City Council and the Planning Commission passed a package of zoning changes collectively called Connected Communities. And our organization and other organizations opposed it. And the reason that we opposed it is because it makes it much easier and more profitable for developers to develop, but it does not require that any of that increased value go to affordable housing. Even though we have nearly 46,000 households that can't afford their home, it doesn't say that any of that increased value needs to help any of those 46,000 households. It can just all go to the developers. And it also doesn't do anything to prevent displacement in our neighborhoods. And so we pushed hard against it. Generically, this type of policy is called upzoning. And the whole idea behind it is, at least the idea that is put forth, is that if we make it easier and more profitable for developers to develop, they will develop more, which is true. And that when they develop more, regardless of how expensive the housing they develop is, even if it's all very expensive, that increase in supply in and of itself will decrease the cost of housing overall throughout the city. So it is, which is just not how things work. It's not how it works with housing. The developers, of course, will continue to charge as much as they can, as much as somebody is able to pay. And so we looked at, in particular, a real vacant lot in Roselawn. And that vacant lot, before Connected Communities, could hold about a max of 7 apartments. And then after connected communities, because of removing density restrictions, changing height restrictions, removing parking restrictions, that same building now could have 55 apartments, which more than quadruples the income over a year. And so what we're saying is, if there are properties like this throughout our city where a developer could, because of the flick of a pen, the mayor signing this legislation, because of that signature, now developers can quadruple or even more greatly increase their income potential. Some of that value should stay in the neighborhoods. Some of that value should go to create affordable housing. And in fact, across the country, we would be in the minority to not do that. There are 411 approximately communities across the country that when they allow developers greater density, they require in return affordable housing. Not all of those policies are wonderful, but they are all certainly better than requiring nothing in return. And so we were able, through all of the pushing, 3 council members, Vice Mayor Kearney, President Pro Tem Victoria Parks, and Councilperson Scotty Johnson, they decided to stand with us, and they voted no on this package. And they explained why they were voting no, that the main reason was the lack of focus on affordable housing. And so what has come out of that is the creation of a task force which purpose is to bring forth amendments to connected communities and get those amendments passed. And so the task force has 5 committees. One committee is focused on infrastructure. There's accessibility, physical accessibility, environment, design, like physical design, and then affordable housing. And so we are leading the Affordable Housing Committee, and the goal of that committee is to come out with amendments that, if passed, would change connected communities into something that actually creates affordable housing and has provisions to prevent displacement. And so we've got a group of people that have been meeting consistently nearly every week for the past for a month, and we are utilizing data from other cities about how they operate, and then are finalizing our own recommendations. But the sum of what the recommendations will look like is that if you are a developer and because of connected communities you now can build with greater density, then a percentage of the units that you build have to be affordable. And we're specifically targeting affordable at 50% of the median income or lower. The reason for that, and for folks that don't spend your days thinking about median income, 50% of median income today is right around $50,000 a year. And so $50,000 a year or less, the housing would have to be affordable at. And the reason that we target that area is because of those nearly 46,000 households who can't afford their home today, 84% of those households have an income at 50% or lower. So even though the city often pushes housing that's affordable at 80% of AMI or 100 or 120%, there is virtually no need at that level. Almost all of the need is at 50% and lower. And then a percentage of those affordable units, we will say, has to be affordable at 30% of the median and lower, because that's where 59% of the need is. We will have provisions in there to ensure that the units stay affordable and to prevent displacement of people, and also to track the outcomes and and get the people involved in judging the outcomes.
Would you tell Peter to mute himself?
Oh yeah.
Peter, would you mute yourself? We're hearing you. Peter?
Peter, if you're able to mute yourself, maybe I can mute you. Okay, I muted
Good.
you, Peter. Thank you. The rough timeline, it's very rough at this point, but somewhere in the next couple of months, we'll say, there will be 2 engagement sessions held, one on the west side of town, one on the east side of town, to invite anybody and everybody to come and look over the recommendations these various committees have come up with at that point and give input. And then the committees will go back and have to utilize that input. And then I anticipate we will do another round of those engagement sessions. And the goal is sometime before the end of the first quarter of 2025 to have the final package of amendments that then goes in front of City Council. So when we get to that point, we will need folks to show up and speak up and support these various amendments that will be coming forth. And even before that point, when we have the engagement sessions, we want to make sure everybody knows, and please come out and give your perspective and say what you think is good and what you think needs to be changed. Just to note some more, we are currently, as we have been for years, are organizing with many different groups of people that are living in affordable housing that is in jeopardy. Most often these days, it's in jeopardy because of conditions. And so the biggest of those developments is Williamsburg, which has been in the press. People have seen it, nearly 1,000 units of housing, much of which is in the neighborhood of Carthage, but it also so big that it is actually in multiple municipalities. And there, tenants were living periodically without access to clean water, without electricity, with standing sewage in their apartments, and no end on the horizon. And so we organized tenants there. The city has been involved and has been a good partner in this. Through legal means, that property has been forced into receivership, which means a court-appointed third-party operator is managing the property, and then the dollars that come in from rents have to go into fixing the documented problems, and that is checked regularly by the courts. And so what we're hearing from tenants is that there's still lots of improvement to happen, but that the tenants believe things are now moving in the right direction. There's a significant amount, I don't know the exact percentages now, maybe 15-20% vacancy there, which is a couple hundred units, which is bad. We desperately need housing. But what has happened is residents that were living in units that where sewer was backing up, etc., have now been moved into units that don't have those problems, and so vacating those units that are in terrible shape, and so that they can be fixed. And all of these fights take a long time, but it appears that property, those nearly 1,000 units of housing, will be saved. Another good example is Alexandra Apartments in Walnut Hills. If anybody has driven on Gilbert Avenue recently, on the east side of the avenue, you can see scaffolding and work materials going up around Alexandra Apartments. Alexandra Apartments is predominantly seniors. It is affordable. It was developed with low-income housing tax credits, and the owner of that property didn't want it anymore and just stopped paying the mortgage, which put the property, of course, on the verge of foreclosure, which would mean that it would be lost. It would no longer be affordable, and all the folks there, all the seniors there, would be out. But we were able to organize with people there, and long story short, that property is now in new ownership hands, and it is committed to staying affordable, and it is being renovated, and people are able to still be in the building. So that Alexandra has also been saved as of now. And we're organizing with tenants also in Avondale and East Price Hill and College Hill and South Fairmount and West End. And so if you yourself or you've got neighbors or friends, family who are struggling in their buildings, it's always, or eviction has been filed on that person. It's always good to ask questions like, your apartment is not getting repaired. Is it just your apartment, or is it yours and your neighbors? They filed an eviction against you. Is it just you, or is it your whole floor? Is it, ask those sort of questions, because sometimes it is in fact just this one person is experiencing it. In that case, we recommend people contact legal aid to seek services. But in a growing examples, it is not just a one-off. It is whole buildings and whole groups of people, and certainly if a household is experiencing just really horrendous conditions in their unit and repairs are not being done, calls for repairs are not being returned, there's a very good chance that more people in that building are experiencing the same thing. And so we would love to know about it so that we can connect with people there, and so we can bring our tenant organizing teach-in to that neighborhood. There's some people online. I'll pause a little bit and see if anybody has any questions here in person.
One thing that comes to mind, it sounds like you're making some real inroads in terms of the city. For a while, they were very reluctant to do anything. And so you've made that, and the possibility of changing or amending that whole policy of development. So that seems very positive. For a while, the city was saying it was doing more with affordable housing, but they were calling another fund affordable housing. How did that transpire?
Yeah. So thanks. So in case folks couldn't hear on Zoom,